Hello everyone, Razorblade Mago here, and today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on the latest mega blockbuster from PlayStation. You all know what it is, God of War Ragnarok, which of course is developed by Sony Santa Monica Studio, published of course by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Really, this game does not need any kind of introduction. This is one of the very few mega behemoths to come out this year. And obviously, considering that I'm a big fan of the God of War franchise and I tend to talk about almost every PlayStation exclusive that comes out these days, here it is. Here's the video. So one note about the footage is that the footage that is in this video is going to be coming from the first hour of the game, because I want people, as far as visual spoilers, to go in as blind as possible. However, in order to get some points across, I will be mentioning one slightly spoilery element of this game that has not been shown in any of the trailers, and it's a big addition to the game. But I have to talk about it in order to talk about one of the big elements of this new God of War duology that I have more mixed feelings on. So just that little bit right there. I guess to introduce it, as far as what I think of the game overall, now that when I made that video about my gut reaction to the main story, I hadn't yet 100% completed the game. I hadn't yet gotten the platinum trophy. And now that I have, and I spent about 55 hours, give or take, to get the platinum, to 100% the game. And I beat the main story on Give Me No Mercy difficulty. And then I completed it post-game on the Gimme Balance difficulty. And overall, now that I've spent the full amount of time with God of War Ragnarok that I'm going to, I think the game overall is very good. I think this is definitely the best game PlayStation have had a hand in over 2 years since the console launched. I think there's a lot to love about it. At the same time, though, I am a bit puzzled by the high scores and very, very positive adjectives that are being thrown at it. Things like, this is one of the best PlayStation games of all time, this game is a masterpiece. I don't agree. It's a little puzzling to me, because I think there are definitely big elements of this game that are downright terrible, and I'll get into that through this video. So normally when I do videos like this, I want to break it down, from the pros and the cons. But this time, I'm going to, because this is such a behemoth of a game, I'm just going to go down based on categories of things. So I'm going to start with the graphics, since I think this honestly is the least important aspect of God of War Ragnarok. I know that sounds bad to say that the graphics are, oh my god, it's like I'm dissing the work that went into the graphics. No, that's not my intent at all. But I think in the overall grand scheme of things, the graphics are far from the most important element of God of War Ragnarok's success. And truth be told, the older I've gotten, the less I've cared about whether a game has pretty graphics or not. I care more about a game's art direction than I do its raw graphical detail. I think we should all know by now that games that have really impressive raw graphical detail it doesn't always equate to a great feeling playing video game. But as far as the graphics, God of War Ragnarok is about as impressive as something can get. I would say that as far as graphics, they are impeccable. The amount of time and effort that these PlayStation studios put into making their games look like this is truly remarkable. And if I were to really attempt to process how much effort goes into this, what is the coding and the amount of work that goes into it, I think my brain would start to leak out of my ears. And just everything about this game looks immaculate. The lighting, the shadow work, the facial animation is incredible, the particle effects, and all of this, the game looking as wonderful as it does, getting it to run at a, I think, an almost flawless 60 frames on the PS5 is amazing. And, you know, some people will try to discount this as saying, well, it was built for the PS4. It's like a souped up PS4 game. Doesn't matter. I don't care if it's a souped up PS4 game. This game runs and looks extremely good on the PS5. And the good thing about this too is that it doesn't have that odd image blur that Horizon Forbidden West did at launch. And I think as far as color composition and the contrasting shadows and the characters not getting lost amongst all this detail, I think in that department, God of War Ragnarok is far superior to Horizon Forbidden West. I think also as far as the art direction, this game is definitely a step above the last game. There's are more varied locations, lots of more enemy designs, a spectacular array of bosses that look incredible, that almost all of them look unique. And then we move on to audio, which I think is, you know, almost equally as outstanding. There are excellent performances from the whole cast. Everyone delivers their A game in these roles. I'll give special mention to, of course, Christopher Judge as Kratos, who's great. Alistair Duncan as Mimir, who is probably my favorite character in this new duology of God of War games. As far as new characters, I love Richard Schiff as Odin. Very odd, different take on Odin than I was expecting. And I love that. Some people have mentioned that it's a bit distracting listening to him, especially if they're fans of The West Wing. But I don't feel that way at all. I think he's great as Odin. And then the last shout out I want to give is to Sungwon Cho, who of course known as ProZD on YouTube, who's Ratatoskr, who I'm not going to spoil too much about that character just because I want anyone who hasn't played this game to experience that character for themselves. Of course, as far as the audio, can't move on from that without talking about Bear McCreary's score. It's great. Again, a lot of it is reused motifs from the first game. I love the music from the first God of War. So to hear a lot of the old themes from that's totally fine with me. I have no problem with that, especially some of the remixes. And some of my favorite moments in this game hit the way they do because of the music. I mean, there was one part in particular where they use the same female vocal melody from the track Ashes from the first God of War, and it literally gave me goosebumps when I listened to it. I also love the song that plays over the end credits after you've seen the true ending. It's a lovely song called Blood on the Snow. And normally outside of Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy, I'm not really a big fan of games beginning or ending with songs with lyrics in them. It comes across as really hokey a lot of the time. But Blood on the Snow is an exception because I think it's a great song. I've listened to it repeatedly this last month ever since the game came out. I think it's a really good song. And that leads me to the writing and the storytelling, which I think is mostly fantastic. I loved listening to this large cast of different personalities interact with one another. The reason I disagree so much with this opinion, this common opinion that's popped up about God of War, that it's a bad thing that they've cranked up the humor and the silliness, and that it almost comes across as like MCU level. And the reason I disagree with that assessment, like it's a bad thing, is because I think only certain characters are outright sarcastic or goofy. but I think they work because they interact with characters who are way more toned down, like Kratos, for example. A comedian is only as good as his or her straight man. And there are a lot of, as far as a comedy duo, there are a lot of straight characters in this game that aren't, yucking it up every 5 minutes like some of the other characters are. And I think what's interesting too about this game is that the humor does not feel out of place because, again, it's relegated to specific characters and it's appropriate given their look or personality, especially some of the ones that we know from the past game. And to suggest that it's up there with MCU as far as, pulling me out of the experience and all that, I definitely disagree with that. I don't think any humor in this game comes even close to how irritating it can be in a really badly written Marvel movie. I just disagree with that whole cloth. And speaking of Kratos, it's almost surreal to witness how much Kratos has grown, even in the time between the last game and then this one. And he also grows during the events of Ragnarok as well. And by the end of the game, he is almost like a not totally different character, but he's absolutely wiser, and his personality grows and changes over time. And to hear him say thank you to people as a longtime fan of God of War is bizarre. I can't put into words how bizarre it is to hear Kratos say somebody thank you or much appreciated. And then to also call somebody brother, or it's strange even hearing Kratos call Atreus son on such a frequent basis. I also greatly admire a lot of the exploration of themes in this game. Themes like personal responsibility, how violence influences multiple generations of a family, how grief affects people in very different ways, and also finding the strength within yourself to heal and learn from past trauma. The game got me pretty emotional during a few moments, especially during the beginning. The flip side to that, though, is that some of the thematic elements are heavy-handed to an eye-rolling degree. And it's the same thing that I said about Horizon Forbidden West, where it felt like a character every hour or so needed to sit down with the main character and blatantly just spell out the theme of, or one of the themes of the game to the main character. In Horizon Forbidden West, it was something along the lines of, Aloy, you need to stop carrying the world on your shoulders and learn to trust people. And here, in God of War Ragnarok, it's, we must be better. You are defined by your choices. There's always a choice when it comes to being better. And look, I think the storytelling and the exploration of themes is handled way better in this than in Horizon Forbidden West. But there has to be some kind of mandate at Sony for their games' writers that they have to spell out the game's themes multiple times throughout the story just to ensure that even the dumbest people who play these games get it. You could play a drinking game with Ragnarok. Take a drink every time a character says, we must be better, or you are defined by your choices, and you'll be dead long before the credits start to roll. You'll die of alcohol poisoning long before you get to the climax of the game. And also, as far as pacing, I think mostly the story pacing is good, but some of the sections go on for way too long. And I think infamously, I'm mostly thinking about the Anger Boda part, which, if you've played Ragnarok, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That segment with Anger Boda, oh my god, it goes on and on and on, and I'm just like, oh my god, please just move on. Just stop. Get away from this. Go do something else. I don't want to play this part anymore. Even though there are some great moments in that whole sequence, especially towards the end. But my god, It takes a long time to get through it, and it's the one moment in the game that I am dreading going back to if I ever decide to replay this game in the future. One thing that I think deserves its own section as far as how the storytelling, how an element of the storytelling influences later things about the game design, the gameplay and all that, is this. I have to talk about the one-shot handheld cinematography. I realized after this duology of God of War titles that I would have preferred they'd not done this. And I'm not crazy about more games starting to adapt this look at me one-shot style cinematography. I am mixed about it, because I think on a storytelling level, it conflicts with the cinematic nature of the story. It's a lot of handheld cinematography. And when I'm presented with this very cinematic style of these like giant events happening, but the camera is being like handled like it's somebody in like filming a documentary or something with quite a bit, not shaky cam, but you can tell that it's being handled with somebody holding a tripod and all that. I think, honestly, the only game that I have ever played where I feel like the handheld cinematography, one-shot handheld cinematography works for the story and the game thematically and gameplay-wise has been Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. That's really the only one that I felt like earned that flashy, look at me, one-shot style of cinematography throughout its campaign. Because it made sense to where you couldn't cut away from anything that Senua is going for and experiencing herself. You are in her head the entire time. Almost literally. And that works. But with God of War, it comes across as just showy and unnecessary. But as far as a game where, and this is where I'll get into the spoilery thing that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I think it is impressive how it continues to maintain that one-shot style, even with this game having multiple playable characters, where there are moments where you're mostly playing as Kratos, but for the first time, there are sections where you play as Atreus. And the cutting between those, the transition between the Kratos gameplay and the Atreus gameplay is very impressive as far as maintaining that one-shot style of cinematography. And it does a lot of creative things to keep the story going, even when it changes perspective. I think that stuff is very creative, very impressive. I really like that. However, as I'll talk about in a little bit, I am less enthused by how this one-shot style affects other things about the game. So let's get into the gameplay, which is going to be the meat of the experience. I think some people are going to be surprised by how similar the combat feels from the first game. And I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing. But I also think the combat has been improved from the first game. There's more variety as far as the moveset. It feels more visceral. And I thought the Blades of Chaos, while cool to use in the original, they didn't quite reach their potential in that first game. And I think it was the case because they were introduced like halfway through that first game. Here from the beginning, after I think like a little bit into after the first mission, the first like real like tutorial style mission, you can use the Blades of Chaos, and they are better used this time around. They have a lot more varied move sets. You can unlock more things with them. They're still not quite how they were in the old games, but they're better compared to the first in this new duology. And as far as the combat, I recommend playing through the story on that Give Me No Mercy difficulty, because I felt like it was a fairly balanced challenge. It didn't have crazy, at least from my experience, I didn't feel like it had any crazy difficulty spikes or anything like that. And, you know, I died my fair share of times, but I never reached this point where I felt like the enemy placement or the types of mobs you encountered were unbalanced for this difficulty. So I personally recommend the Give Me No Mercy difficulty. And speaking of enemy, the variety has been given a serious boost. That is one of the big complaints that I forgot to mention in my God of War 2018 video, is the lack of enemy variety. And you notice it within the first few hours, how many different enemies there are compared to the first game. It's no longer just the same looking fire demon or ice demon or anything like that. It's lots of different things. Lots of different styles of creatures that require their own strategy, that require you to, map out where the enemies are and think smartly about enemy placement and where to use certain moves to get the most out of, your moveset. It's really good how much variety they've put into the enemies and how this improved combat system complements that. And also the bosses. Most of the bosses in this game are fucking incredible. They're a massive step up in quality compared to the first game. You're not going to have a troll every hour to fight. This game, within the first 2 hours, I counted 3 story bosses that I loved, whose movesets are enormous and varied, and each of them have satisfying conclusions. The other element to God of War Ragnarok that you're going to be doing most of the time outside of combat is the puzzle solving, which I like a lot of the puzzles in the old God of Wars because I felt like they were thoughtfully designed, they made sense, and their solutions were fun to figure out. That's not the case with God of War 2018 and with God of War Ragnarok, because they always felt like constant mini roadblocks. None of them are particularly inventive or fun to solve. They're like minor bumps in the road that don't need to be there. And the puzzles are home to what I think is the most universally highlighted issue of Ragnarok, which is the constant, annoying hand-holding during the puzzles. For some reason, recent Sony games like Forbidden West, like this one, are completely against letting the player figure out the solution to a puzzle themselves. I don't think it's as bad here as it was in Forbidden West, where Aloy wouldn't shut her fucking mouth whenever she encountered a new puzzle, but I wanted to roundhouse kick Atreus or Mimir in the face every time they shouted hints to a puzzle I hadn't even been given 10 seconds to look over yet. It comes across as patronizing. There's a big difference between a clue and then flat out telling you the solution to a puzzle. And God of War Ragnarok repeatedly commits this sin of spoiling puzzle solutions for you. And there is no option to turn this off. There's accessibility options for literally every other fucking thing under the sun in God of War Ragnarok. But there's no prompt to turn off the hints. And these aren't even just hints. They're puzzle spoilers that won't go away. And it makes me feel like they're babying me. I'm almost fucking 30 years old. I know how to solve a puzzle in a God of War game, guys. Like, let me do my thing. Please, just patch this in. If you want to patch in anything into God of War Ragnarok, patch that in as an option to shut up Atreus or Mimir. Just shut them up. Another thing, too, that is a holdover from the first game that they've doubled down on that I still do not like is the gear system and the crafting bullshit. I cannot tell you guys how tired I am of gear systems and crafting in video games. Every time I hear that a new game that I want to play has a gear system or crafting, my enthusiasm is lessened because I am just tired of them. I don't gel with gear systems. I don't play God of War to have a gear system or craft things. It feels so unnecessary, and I don't think it fits a series like God of War or a character like Kratos. The idea of Kratos upgrading his loincloth to level 5 that gives him +6 damage is goofy as shit to me. I don't play God of War for gear or crafting. The combat system is fun enough to where that, improving that, creating more depth for that, that should be the primary focus. Not giving Kratos a level 5 loincloth that gives him +6 health or -7 runic damage. It's stupid. And that actually brings me pretty neatly to what I realized is my main problem with this duology. It's a personal thing that I have with this new duology of God of War games. And I realized it when I was replaying 2018 earlier this year, and it really solidified it in my mind when I was playing Ragnarok, is that for me personally, there is a disconnect between what I know Kratos to be capable of and how the games force limitations on him physically via the level design, via the lack of a jump button, via the fact that he can't, like, walk over simple rocks or hop over a lava pool to solve a puzzle that's, like, a few feet away, thanks to these weird limitations that they give Kratos. Look, I get what they're going for with this. They want the gameplay to reflect the grounded, toned-down approach to Kratos that the story has. But it just doesn't gel with me overall. And it's especially annoying, like I mentioned, when the game would present a puzzle that felt so unnecessary given what I know Kratos to be capable of physically. And this is where that same suspension of disbelief issue that I had from the first game rears its ugly head in this one, where it's really pushing it as far as suspending my disbelief of what Kratos to be capable of in this game, where he can't simply jump over a rock to reach a new area for a puzzle, or he can't swim around a little pond to get to the other side of an island to solve a puzzle quicker. What also doesn't help is that these new limitations with Kratos make exploring the environment a lot more time-consuming and inefficient than it normally would be. Because Kratos can't jump, because he can't freely navigate the environment in a way that's realistic, thanks to the game's limitations, you have to, when you're going, especially in post-game and finding all the collectibles, there are moments where you'll have to slowly plod through an environment just to get to one specific part of it that you need to get to, and it's frustrating. And it doesn't help, too, that the map is awful. Like, bold letters, italics, neon lit. Awful. I don't understand how any of the map designers at Sony Santa Monica sat back when their work was done and looked at this map and thought, yes, this is acceptable. Without hyperbole, this might be one of the worst maps I have ever seen from a game with this kind of budget. It is straight up unreadable. And I don't understand why on God's beautiful green earth this map is 2D when some environments stack on top of each other and have multiple little collectibles in, like, hidden rooms. It's as if the maps from Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal were crushed into this mess of a 2D map. It's just pure terrible design. I don't know why, after 4 years between the last game and this one, they didn't come up with a better system for the map. And another thing that is even worse compared to the first game is the compass. Why? I don't know how it's possible that the compass in this game is even worse than it was in the last game. It is so inefficient at guiding you to where you want to go that it's comical There is one moment where I was trying to get to a side quest in the post game, and the way the map has you go from the fast travel system, the way the map has you go and the compass has you go from the fast travel system is, it's like the game intentionally is trying to put you on the longest pathway possible to get me to my point of destination, when I could have just gone to another fast travel point and then just zipped my way there. I don't know why the compass doesn't point you to another fast travel system, and then on the map where you can see all the different fast travel points, it doesn't point you to which one is the closest or anything like that. It's mind-boggling how terrible the navigation is in this game for the map and the compass. It's just, especially in 3D environments where you have multiple layers to a level. I'm sitting here just trying to just process why it was designed like this. I'm no game designer, but even I know that this is unacceptable. And it doesn't help too that the UI is not very good either. This is becoming more of a problem with modern AAA gaming, but the UI is just very messy and weird, and it just feels like you have to do too many button pushes to get to where you need to go. Another thing too, I mentioned earlier how this game feels like a souped up PS4 game. That's fine as far as graphics, but as far as the gameplay, you can definitely tell that this is a PS4 game because there is a lot of squeezing between gaps, of shimmying on legends, of ducking under rocks. Very obvious inclusions to hide loading screens. And this is where my issue with this one-shot style of storytelling starts to annoy me, because it impacts multiple elements of the game's navigation. It influences the fast travel system, which is still tedious and annoying, and I don't like it. It impacts how effective it makes the flow of gameplay and level design, because you can't just say, oh, I want to fast travel to this area or to this room. No, because it has the one-shot style camera, and because it's still running on the PS4 hardware, where it has to work for a damn near 10-year-old console at this point, what it makes you do is, oh, I want to go to this area of the map. Well, in order to do that, you then have to find the nearest fast travel point. You have to go to it. You have to walk through a door. You have to walk through the little world tree hub area. Then you have to stand there and wait for it to load, or wait for the characters to stop talking. Then you have to walk through a door. Then you have to walk through the gateway. Then you have to get on a boat or walk across the map to fucking get where you need to go. You gotta shimmy across ledges. You gotta shimmy across rocks. You gotta duck under between shit. And finally, you might be at the area. And because the game doesn't have insignias on the map that tell you where certain collectibles are, and they don't mark out when you've collected a specific thing, it's like walking around with your thumb up your ass, half blind, trying to figure out what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. It's just, this one-shot style camera, I don't mind it being there for a linear game, a linear story-based game. That's one thing. But when it's in a game that is semi-open world, or is open world, like Halo Infinite, where I have to be running around the map a lot, going to different fast travel points, I don't understand why it has to be there like this. It's flashy, it's fine when it comes to just purely the storytelling. Any other area outside of it, I don't like it. I want it gone. And it impacts the actual second-to-second gameplay of this way more than I think the benefits it brings to the table as far as impressive storytelling. I would much rather just take the simple, let's cut scenes. Let's have a tiny little loading screen. I can handle having a location, having a simple fast travel point. I click it, I wait 5 seconds on a loading screen, and I'm there. I don't need this dumb world tree one-shot camera bullshit to get around the environment. I'm tired of it. I don't want it anymore. Please, just make it go away. Moving on from that, let's talk about the bugs I found in this game, which Um, it's not not that buggy, but there are a few things I do have to bring up. There is one bug that thankfully has been patched out now, where I couldn't change the difficulty on the fly. One of the things that Sony liked to brag about when they were discussing the accessibility options with this game was that you could change the difficulty at any time that you want. Well, except in my version of the game, there was a bug that prevented me from doing that. And I didn't realize that until after the main story, because like I said, I went through the whole thing on Give Me No Mercy difficulty. But for the cleanup, I was like, all right, Give Me Balance should be okay. And then I would go into the menu to change the difficulty. And it wouldn't save. And then I would try it again. And it wouldn't save. So I thought, maybe that's an issue with Give Me Balance. Let's see what happens if I jack it down to the baby story mode. And it still would not save. So I had to basically brute force it to save after multiple attempts to save my normal difficulty settings. So that was unacceptable. Again, it's been patched out, but I don't know why that was there day one. And there are also a few minor animation glitches that I noticed, like some of the lighting popping in, some of the character models getting, stuck in the environment. And I had one soft lock where an enemy bugged out, and it was oh my god, it was a mini boss too, a pretty challenging mini boss in the beginning, and I beat the mini boss. The problem is the last minion I had to fight glitched out of the environment and was unreachable. So I had to restart the fight, and I had to fight the boss again, which, thank you game. And I had one really odd hard crash. It happened during a cutscene where I was talking to a character, and all of a sudden at the tail end of the cutscene, the dialogue cut out. All the audio. And I couldn't hear what the characters were talking about, and then that carried over into the gameplay. So when I paused the game and hit restart checkpoint, it crashed the whole PS5 to the point where I had to rebuild the database. So, yay. That's one hard crash that I had to my PS5. Not good. And that leads me into the final topic that I want to get into for this video, which is the post-game itself, which was one of the things I was more mixed on in God of War 2018. But I actually think they have done some improvements for the post-game for Ragnarok. So one of the big improvements in this one is that I actually liked doing the Odin's Ravens collectible this time around. It's a decent little side job in this game because now it's got its own interesting lore behind it, and the consistent rewards you get for doing it are a lot more plentiful compared to God of War 2018. And the ending of the side quest actually has a boss to it, and that I was not expecting. And it's actually a fairly, maybe not difficult boss, but challenging. And it has its own multiple phases and all that. And I was very impressed that they actually took one of the more tedious aspects of the original game's post-game, and they made it one of my favorite parts of the post-game in God of War Ragnarok. I was very impressed with that. And compared to God of War 2018 as well, there is a lot to explore. A lot of side stuff to explore in this game. Especially Vanaheim, which Vanaheim to me is my favorite realm in this game. And it is extremely impressive how many hidden areas there are in this world. It is crazy the amount of hidden stuff there is in this world beyond the main story. And I honestly believe that you could have taken this one world and made a decent little $40 single player game out of it. I really do. It's that big. Unfortunately, it's not all positive. I still don't like the Muspelheim trials. I still find them just to be tedious. The secret final bosses are a mixed bag as well. Most of them are fine and are a fair challenge, but some of them give off the vibe that the developers were running out of ideas, because there are a few that are just like, oh, fight 2 of them, fight 3 of them at once. And that's the shit that I don't like. I like it when it's a one-on-one style combat encounter, but when they start getting a little saucy with the secret final bosses and they start throwing shit like that in there, that's what starts to annoy me. And the thing with some of the secret bosses as well is that they have this issue where their combat patterns start to all feel similar, where they will come in for a few attacks, and if you're able to time the perfect parries correctly, you'll get some hits in. But then they like run away and they start to do some like AoE or long range combat stuff. And a lot of the post-game bosses had that exact same structure where they would run in, try to hit you, run back, do some long range stuff to make it interesting, and then they would run up to you and try to do some unblockable shit. And it just, that's the kind of stuff that I was like, okay, maybe tone it down with the quantity of these secret final bosses. And side quests are mostly great in this game too. They again, this is another vast improvement compared to God of War 2018, where a lot of the side content, as far as the actual missions, felt very underwhelming in that first game. Some of them in Ragnarok actually feel like main story missions. They feel essential, and I would have loved to have seen them actually incorporated into the main story in place of some other things in there. And they feel essential because they expand on the journeys of some of the characters that you're going through, and Kratos and Atreus themselves. And there's one in particular where you have to go to Alfheim, which is the realm of the elves from the first game, and you do this activity with Kratos and Atreus that really feels like you should be forced to play that mission, because it adds quite a bit to the dynamic between Kratos and Atreus and their growing bond as father and son. And as I mentioned previously, the collectibles can be a major pain thanks to the terrible map and the dreadful compass and the confusing backtracking, so that was annoying. Again, I don't know why this game doesn't do a better job of specifically telling you where you have collected which collectibles on the map and makes it visually easy to read. I don't get it, but then again, I'm not a game designer. I don't know, maybe there's some kind of ass-backwards reason why they did it like this, I don't know. But that's the way it was. And that, again, well, and again, it brings me to overall. Which overall, with everything taken into account, the pros and the cons, I do really like God of War Ragnarok. And I would recommend it. If you have a PS5, and you're looking to buy the next big blockbuster from PlayStation, I say go for it. This is absolutely worthy of $70. Absolutely, as far as the quality and as far as the quantity. But in a way, this is what I want to end with. It's a little more like downtrodden, but it's something that I feel like needs to be said, is that I think God of War Ragnarok, in a way, it represents the final hurrah for me as far as the cinematic story-driven Sony games. And I kind of felt sad in a way, because while I was playing it, I realized that these lavishly expensive, gargantuan single-player PlayStation games, they don't floor me like they used to. You know, they're slickly produced entertainment, and they are very good. And God of War Ragnarok is definitely one of the best games I've played this year. Hands down. But they are also very safe. They repeat a lot of Sony-isms that I've started to notice in recent years with these games. Like the hand-holding, like the blunt messages, just some of the story ideas that are baked in. And while Ragnarok is it's a very enjoyable time. It has a lot of valuable qualities to it. I think I am ready for something new from PlayStation. And by something new, I don't mean live services. I don't mean that crap designed to milk your bank account dry. No. What I mean by new things, I mean new genres, new types of gameplay, new art styles, more challenging material. When I think of the types of games I want to see more of from PlayStation, I think of titles like Death Stranding, Astro's Playroom, Returnal. And those games are varying degrees of quality in my opinion, but they all share what I want to see more from PlayStation. It's a different flavor from them. Death Stranding is very unique within PlayStation's library of games. Astro's Playroom is a lovely experience, a bite-sized experience that I would love to see more of. Returnal is weird and different and dark and disturbing and has gameplay systems that are risky and it's challenging. And while I don't think it's successful in a lot of ways, I think it is definitely the most unique thing they have released for the PS5 era so far. You know, I may end up eating these words after a few years of their newfound obsession with live services, but that's just how I feel in the moment. That's how I feel right now. Can't help it. And I think God of War Ragnarok, like I said, it's very good. And I would recommend it. But for me, the older I've gotten, the less impressed I am by these kind of games from PlayStation. And God of War Ragnarok is, personally for me, it feels like the last hurrah for this style of game. I'm ready for them to try new things. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, subscribe. Let me know what you thought about God of War Ragnarok. And as always, I am Razorblade Mango. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you all later. Bye.